Hi, this is Glenn Crooks, and welcome to another episode of NYCFC Views. Roberto Abramowitz, he'll be joining me in a moment. Today, we've got a very special guest, the sporting director for the New York City Football Club, David Lee.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. NYCFC Views.
Collins approaches the shot, and New York City wins the first MLS Cup on their first try, and they're going crazy. Tiene tiro y gol! Gol! New York City es el campeón de Major League Soccer.
The sickest New York City FC podcast. It's gonna be sick.
I'm Glenn Crooks, and Roberto Abramowitz here as well. Roberto, where are you? There you are. Hey, I just wanted to ask our intros, very cool from the MLS Cup. Why in Spanish? So you said New York City, and you said Major League Soccer. Aren't there Spanish translations for that?
Yeah, but we don't use them because we don't translate. This is a really good question. We don't translate. You should not translate proper names. Okay, when you go to Mexico, Burger King isn't Rey de las Hamburguesas. It's Burger King. It's a trademark. That's a name of the team. That's the name of the league. And so you respect that. Now, not everybody in Spanish, and I would say a majority don't. In Mexico, which is where I grew up, in Televisa, there was an order that you couldn't use like American terms. And so they had to invent all these Mexican terms or Spanish terms for in the NFL, in baseball, and they translated all the team names. And so the Blue Jays became Los Azulejos, but there's some of them that were ridiculous. So like the Dodgers would be Los Esquivadores, and they never did that. The Yankees were Yankees, and they just changed the way that they spelled it. But no, I never subscribed to that. And I've always just held that the names of the teams are the names of the teams. And so New York Giants are Los New York Giants. I never say Los Gigantes de Nueva York. Yep. That's it. That's why it's New York City.
It's something I've been meaning to ask you. So, the New York City Football Club has a sporting director, and he's David Lee. So in a moment, we're going to run the interview in its entirety. Then you and I will respond and react afterwards. But it's pretty interesting. It's, Maxi Morales coming back, but also Gabby Pereira departing and getting some details I don't think we heard before. Talk a little bit about Tati Castellanos and the transfer and what amount of that transfer the New York City can use for player acquisitions, and go into detail there, what he can use and can't. The disappointment of the performances this season of Tylus Magno, who simply could not be a 9, but could Neymar, and he kind of diffuses the Neymar thing a little bit.
Oh, come on. You had to do that? Seriously? Don't you know how to tease anything? Don't you know how? You should have said, "Ooh, I wonder what number he's going to get." And people would have tuned in. Now they're going to tune out. They're done. They're done, Glenn.
Listen to his explanation. Saudi Arabia, are they going to? Is that going to be a challenge for MLS? Fourth DP, is that reality? Budget rule changes. Messi, what does it mean for the league? Are the sporting directors a little concerned with how that happened? And that's the end of my tease. You want to hear it?
That's you diffuse the bomb.
It's not about diffusing the bomb. It's setting it up, teeing it up. And here he is, sporting director David Lee. This interview taking place on Wednesday. Here you go. All right, we've got a special guest now on NYCFC Views. Really appreciate the time and the insight from David Lee, sporting director for the New York City Football Club. David, how are you? The window recently closed, so I'm wondering if your life is at least a little less stressful.
Yeah. Hey, Glenn. Good to see you again. A little less hectic, that's for sure. It's been a busy couple of months in the build up to the window, and then obviously throughout. So yeah, slightly less hectic, slightly more time for lots of other things going on, whether it's second team, academy, all the other things that need to get done around the club. But yeah, a little less hectic, a little bit more sleep now, which is nice.
Yeah, I just to give everybody the visual on the road when David travels with the team and we're there, and there's not much time to talk because he's always looking into his phone. That's that's what I have burned into my memory.
My phone, as my wife will say, is my best friend. I spend a lot of time either looking at it, talking to it, or whatever needs to get done. So it's permanent fixture in my hand.
It really makes you wonder, the difference of doing business in soccer now than 15 or 20 years ago, 25 years ago. It really it is pretty interesting because everything is so immediate.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't imagine what life would have been like 15, 20 years ago. Lots of faxes, lots of phone calls from your office, but, being able to do it all digitally now makes it a lot easier, makes it much quicker. You can obviously reach people anytime, and so you can get a lot more answers quicker, which is helpful.
All right, let's review some of the players incoming and some other things about this job you have as sporting director. Maxi Moralez is right off the top. He left unexpectedly at the end of the 2022 season, and now he's been reacquired for the remainder of 2023. So let's talk about getting Maxi back and how that all worked. We understand there weren't many minutes at Racing Club. He had incentive to go back there, but now he's had incentive to, as he's stated on social media, to come back home to New York City. So how did this all happen?
Yeah, it certainly wasn't one of the ones we were expecting to happen in the window when we looked at it. Maxi returning wasn't something on our radar when he left in December. And I will remember the conversation when he came to my office in December at the end of last year to say that he wanted to go back to Argentina. And it was a big shock, big surprise. It wasn't something that we planned on or expected. But ultimately at that point, we felt like, it was the right thing to do. Maxi was very set that this was what he really wanted and what his heart wanted to do. And so from our perspective, we then had to try and accommodate. And really, I'd stayed in touch with Maxi, wished him the best before games. He'd done the same around some of our performances this year. And it was maybe a week, 10 days before the end of the transfer window. He sent me a message. I woke up to a message early morning and asking if he could chat to me later on that day. And so that really kickstarted the process. And he reached out and said, look, he'd enjoyed being back in Argentina. He'd accomplished what he wanted to accomplish and play for his boyhood team. I know he's spoken about there being a debt, and he wanted to repay the debt to Racing for everything they did. But really, he describes New York as home, both for him and his family and his children. New York's his home, and so his conversation with us was, is it possible for me to return home? And so following that, there was a lot of discussion on our end. How do we make it work? Of course, Maxi's an unbelievable player, fantastic ambassador. It's only 8 months ago he was performing at such a high level in the playoffs, in some of our best performances. And so, we knew from an on-pitch side what he would give us, but we also understood the team's different now. The locker room is different. We've got a lot of young players. And so we had to really assess and have a chat with Maxi about what his role on and off the pitch would be if he did return. And so we had lots of those conversations, both me and Nick, and obviously then felt really, really comfortable with what Maxi was able to bring for us. And that became a key thing to try and get accomplished before the end of the deadline, and delighted that he's now back home. And it was amazing to see him and give him a hug and welcome him back in person this week.
Well, you can see that the supporters are thrilled that Maxi is back, and under different terms, obviously, contractually. I don't want specific numbers, but it wasn't real clear. Is it through the end of this year and into next year? What's the commitment for Maxi in New York City FC?
Yeah, so he's under contract until December of 2024. No option years past that. The discussion with Maxi is, you're here now for the next 18, 17 months, and then we'll reassess from there. We know when players get to a certain age, and I hope Maxi won't take offense to me saying he's at that age where for us it's best to go on an almost year-to-year basis. It also didn't make sense for us to bring him back just to the end of the season, because ultimately we see him as a part of the group next year and into next year and adding real value to us as a club. And so for both of us, I think it made sense to get that commitment through next year and him be part of both the remainder of the 2023 season and then helping us to shape the team again for 2024.
On the field, he's a clear number 10. Santi Rodriguez sort of taking the reins. You acquired Richie Ledesma. As Nick Cushing said earlier, upon the acquisition, he sees him more as a 10. So it seems like there's a bit of a glut in that area. I know there's always that narrative you can't have too many good players, but how is this all going to work?
Yeah, I think it's going to shake out over the next days and weeks. Ultimately, the reality is, we can't have enough good players and good attacking players that can make a difference. I think both Santi and Richie have shown, they can be fantastic players in MLS, create chances, create goals, score goals. Maxi has done that since his time here. I think as we looked at it, we didn't look at it as bringing somebody in to replace either of those players. Signed Santi on a long-term contract, and he's, in our opinion, the present and the future of our football club. And so for us, Maxi's coming to help those guys develop and help them improve and help them develop their own games, given his wealth of experience that he has. And so how it all shakes out on the field, I think, is still to be determined. I think we've played a back three oftentimes with almost two number 10s or two winger number 10s. So it's possible to get two winger 10s on the pitch behind a striker. So I think there's a whole bunch of ways that we might be able to structure it. And ultimately, it's going to give Nick and the coaching staff more options as they build and prepare for each week for each opponent to structure the team in the way that will give us the best chance of getting the results that we need.
Now, I want to talk about off the field with Maxi. So Maxi was gone. Tati Castellanos, he's been gone for a while, but a leader. Alexander Collins, Sean Johnson. So in a short period of time, you lost four players, not only up the gut, the spine of your team, but perhaps the greatest leadership group as well. Maybe that's been lacking a little bit this year. Do you have an expectation that Maxi's going to be able to maybe provide the galvanizing force that can help in these final 10 games?
Yeah, so the first thing I say is you probably also missed Anton out of that, who also left and was another key sort of experienced leader type figure who had been in our locker room for a number of years. And so, look, we knew we were going to lose probably a fair amount of experience, and particularly MLS experience in the off season. But we were also not expecting Maxi to come in and be a savior and add everything off the pitch that we may need. I think we've seen tremendous leadership development in Thiago Martins, in Keaton Parks, in James Sands this year, because they've had to step up and take in bigger roles. And, to be honest, I think they're ready to take on bigger roles and more leadership. That when you have those senior players, it's difficult for some of the other players to take more leadership because those older players naturally assume it. So, we're not expecting Maxi to come in and all of a sudden take over some of the work that's been happening in the background with some of our players. However, the fact that he is experienced, he does have leadership qualities, he really enjoys mentoring young players, he's fantastic off the pitch with all of the players and all of the staff, was another reason why we wanted to bring him back, because we do think his experience will help us going into the last 10 games of the season and then towards the playoffs.
I mentioned Tati Castellanos, and I'd like to discuss that a little bit. Good business move. We've talked about the fact that it was a bit of a risk to loan him to Girona and hope that he would perform at a level that he could be sold for the amount that the club really had anticipated. And it's Lazio. It's, reportedly, I think you put it in the press release, we're going to figure plus $15 million on that transfer to Lazio. But I was surprised when we were talking one day, and you said that, and I want to make sure I have this accurate, the MLS budgetary shackles, that of that money that you have obtained from that transfer, you're only allowed to use $1 million for future player acquisitions. Do I have that right? And then what happens with the rest of the money that you attain?
Yeah, so before I answer the MLS question, I'll talk for a second about Tati, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's okay.
I think, as you mentioned in the question, a little bit of a risk last year in loaning him to Girona. And I think it was, while it can be considered a risk, because I think perhaps maybe it was in some ways, we also just had tremendous belief and faith in Tati, and we felt like the market wasn't valuing him correctly. And so, I think there are an awful number of teams that are now regretting the decision not to buy him 12 months earlier, when we were more open to do business, because ultimately, he's only gone and shown what we believed he would, which is that he is a fantastic player that can play at the highest levels in Europe and perform and score goals. Fantastic character, work rate, still so young, can still develop even further. And I'm incredibly proud to have played for us as a club, to have played a very small part in Tati's journey. And I think for us as both locally here in New York, but also for us as City Football Group, our team down in Montevideo, identified Tati as a player, initially recruited him. We spent the sort of best years of his development time in New York, and we helped him become, and he helped himself to become one of the best players in MLS, Golden Boot winner, helped us win an MLS Cup, and then to have the opportunity to then go to Europe is absolute just reward for how hard he works and his development, and is something that hopefully we can see happen far more for a number of our players. And for any of our players who saw Tati and work with Tati, they know that he deserves this. And so I'm really proud for Tati. I'm delighted for him that he'll play in the Champions League. He'll play at a fantastic club in Lazio in a great city. And I'm delighted that we were right, and eventually we got the value that we felt was more reflective of his market value and his talent than we were able to get 12 months ago. And the spell in Girona absolutely helped that. To answer the second question, yeah, you're roughly exactly right. So it's a slightly more than $1 million, but essentially every outgoing player transaction when you sell a player abroad, approximately just over $1 million is eligible to be taken as allocation money, which is really additional salary budget space that you can spend on players within the salary cap. The remainder of the money goes to our business, and so we can use that to fund discretionary spend on DPs or under 22 players or on our academy or other areas of the club. But it's not money that can actually directly impact from a salary cap side the players that are within our roster right now.
Sporting Director David Lee, New York City Football Club. So Tati Castellanos came in as a winger. You developed him into a striker. The staff deserves great credit for that. Ronnie Dylan, Nick Cushing, and others. Then it's Tylus Magno, who started to play the 9 at the end of the 2022 season, seemed to be catching on. And I'm wondering, was there an assumption, or did you anticipate that Tylus was going to be able to slip into that 9 position and do it effectively and continue to grow? Because based on the performance and the shift from the striker to the wing, and now you have Monsef Bakrar, who you've brought in recently. Can you just discuss that a little bit? Tylus Magno is a 9, and that did not seem to work out. And were you hoping for better, in that position?
Yeah, I think so. When we signed Tylus originally, Tylus, growing up through the academy, he played, but mainly as a number 9. In a 4-4-2, so mainly sort of as a 9, second striker, both, and then in the Brazil under-17 World Cup was a number 9, but then made his debut as a senior player in Brazil as a winger, which is quite common. There's very, very few players, young players in Brazil who are strikers who start their career as number 9s. So ultimately, as you said, after Tati left in midsummer last year, we obviously had Eber. Tales played as a number 9 as well. And going into the season, the plan was for Tales to help in both positions. We were looking to acquire a striker in the primary transfer window, weren't able to find the right one at the right price that we could bring in. And so, ultimately, Tales ended up just sort of starting the season in that position. I think Tales will probably be the first to admit he's had a challenging season so far and probably hasn't played as well as both he and we would have liked. I think there are a number of factors for that, but we're talking about a 20-year-old boy still, because he's played so many games. We see, we think of him as somebody that's so much older than 20 years old, and it's very, very normal for young players to have these sort of peaks and dips in their career, and it's our job to try to manage through those and give them the confidence to be able to perform and play at the level they're capable of. And this is a player as well who we saw last season was a fantastically impactful player in MLS. So we know he has the talent, we know he has the ability. ultimately, we probably didn't see enough out of him as a number 9 right at the beginning of the season, which is why we saw Santi play there, Richie played there, obviously Gabe has played a number of games there as well. But heading into the summer market, it was clear as it was in the primary window that we wanted to make sure that we added a number 9, and we're delighted now that Munsef is in the team and has already started, in our opinion, really, really brightly over his first couple of games for the club.
He does look like a 9. The way he carries himself, the way he kind of stays, in that 44-yard width area. He doesn't stray too much wide, and he seems to have his first 3 shots for the club were all on goal, 2 forced saves, and then his first finish. So you like what you've seen?
I think he's been, I think he's been excellent in his first couple of games. We know it's still early. He's arrived to us still in his preseason, and so we know there's going to be more development to come. He's got to get fitter, more endurance in him. However, I think his performances have been really, really encouraging. I think Munsef's also, a little bit of a unique example for us, and sometimes how challenging it can be to find not just a good player, but the right player for us in our system. And Munsef has fantastic technical quality. He's good with his back to goal. However, for us, in the way that we play, we've got a lot of players who like the ball to their feet. And we wanted to find a striker whose also natural movement was to move away from the ball. And so we've seen a lot, his runs in behind, his movement in behind. And that's not super typical, right? It's not super typical of most number 9s. And so, there was a big part of the attraction for him was how good he is off the ball, both in possession, his work off the ball, his movement, his runs, his technical ability is excellent. He's a good finisher. He's only been 1 year outside Algeria, so he's still got huge amounts of room to develop and improve. And equally, the sort of the cherry on the cake for us was how fantastic his work rate is when not in possession. The amount of pressing he does is going to allow us to press even higher. It's something that Tati did really, really well and really effectively for us. And we're certainly not trying to replace Tati, because I think that would be an almost impossible job. However, we want to find a player who fits what we need. And it became really trying to find a striker who was as comfortable receiving the ball to feet and attacking the game in that way, but also could provide a real threat in behind with his pace and his movement. And Munsef's had a really good start. We've got a lot of work and development to do with him, of course, but he's also a fantastic character in our dressing room as well. I was delighted for him to score on his debut. Was really beneficial for him, and now we're just looking forward to hoping to continue to see him take steps in his development and his career in New York.
Well, there's another forward in the news, David. I'm sure this will cause a smile. Neymar, and he told PSG apparently that he doesn't want to return. Some reports have him in Barcelona, and of course there's these other reports that MLS and New York City FC could ultimately be involved. I just want to give a hypothetical, because I think the last time we talked on record, you said pretty definitively that bringing in the big names was not the way New York City Football Club wants to operate. But here's a hypothetical. Don Garber, flies to Paris, wherever Neymar is. Then he meets with Ferran Soriano, and he tells Ferran, look, Neymar wants to be in the city. He wants to come to MLS. We have to try to figure this one out. Is, based on your philosophy, but also based on the philosophy of MLS and with Messi's emergence now, is that something that could possibly occur? And again, that's hypothetical. Could be any big name player.
So I would say, I don't think I've ever, you may be able to disprove this, but I don't think I've ever been definitively stating that big name players won't be in New York, because I think that would be wrong. Firstly, I don't think that would be fair to say that will happen. I think it's clear that we've shifted from that philosophy from the 2014, 15, 16 years into investing in sort of younger players. The reality is we'll look at every opportunity we possibly can, big name player or not, to see if they can help improve the group, improve the team. They're the right cultural fit, all the other factors. And if we can find the right player who's going to help our club on the pitch and off the pitch, we'll always look at that. In this scenario, I think it's quite clear. Our transfer window's closed. He's under contract with PSG. There's nothing to discuss. So you can't sign players outside the transfer window. So this one for me is quite simple. He's obviously an unbelievable, fantastic player, but there's been nothing of actual fact or anything happening around that for me, and our transfer window is now closed. So the only players that can still be signed up until roster freeze are those who are or were free agents before the close of the window.
All right, good answer. How about let's talk about guys that are in. You lost Gabby Pereda unexpectedly. We talked about Maxi Morales earlier. Now, Gabby Pereda, he was your leading scorer, is at the time 6 goals, 3 assists. So he's gone to Qatar. Julian Fernandez, a 19-year-old from Argentina. A Costa Rican, Alonso Martinez. So these two young players, maybe Fernandez more than the other Martinez, is he more the like for like, or at least the replacement for Pereira?
Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about Gabby first, because I think, as you said, it was an unexpected transaction going into the window. We didn't want to move Gabby. We weren't expecting to. And obviously Al Rayyan expressed some interest in the player, and we turned down many bids over the course of 5 to 7 days because we really wanted to keep Gabby at the club. He's obviously an important player for us, performing really well. And it went up to and including, Al Rayyan making their best and final bid as it was, and us saying it wasn't enough and it didn't make sense for us. And so we turned it down, and then 24 hours later, the best and final bid increased again. And it reached a point where we felt as a club, the value that we had on the player had been surpassed. And obviously Gabby wanted to take the move for his own reasons. And so then it became about trying to see if it made sense to do that. One of the reasons why we ultimately felt like it would make sense for the club right now, other than the value that we received, was that it was early enough in the transfer window that provided us enough time to go out and sign a replacement. And so, Julian is a player that we're really familiar with. We actually watched, we only signed Gabby 19 months ago. And so, it wasn't that long ago that we were actually looking at U22 left-footed wingers, and we ended the process with signing Gabby. But Julian was in that process at that time. So he's a player that we tracked, that we followed and monitored. And at that point, Julian was an 18-year-old. I think he had not yet broken through, was just about to break through in Velez at the time when we signed Gabby originally. And so, for us at that point, we felt like it was a little too early for him. However, somebody that we stayed on the radar. And, with Gabby then, moving only 18 months after being here, that was sort of our first port of call was let's go back and look at the players that we also liked and went through the process with Gabby to see if any of those might be suitable. And Julian quickly became our first choice target. He's obviously now played 50, 60 games in Argentina at a high level. He's only 19. One thing I've been keen to stress is, he's 2.5 years younger than Gabby is, now, and he's 1.5 years younger than Gabby was when he arrived. And so is he a direct replacement in a number of ways? Yes, he's a left-footed winger. He's going to wear number 11. He's a U22 player that we probably only would have signed with Gabby leaving. But it's just, I know I've said to you in the past, I don't like talking about players replacing, because you don't replace individual players. The job is to hopefully add for us to learn Julian and for Julian to learn us, so that we can add value to each other, and so he'll take we expect him to take a very similar role on the pitch, but he's only 19 and a half. He's going to need some time to adapt, like most young players do. Gabby didn't come in and start immediately when he joined, and so of course he's coming in at a critical time where we know we need results, we need performances, and we believe that Julian will be able to add to us. But he's also a signing for now and the long term, and we're really excited about being able to bring him in. And like I say, if the Gabby transaction had happened later, or the offer had come later, maybe it wouldn't have made sense for us, because we wouldn't have had that time to make sure that we signed a player that could play in his position before the window closed.
Are you at all concerned, or what's your feeling about now? Qatar is the Middle East, but I'm going to refer more to Saudi Arabia and Al Rayyan, maybe the most recent out of Columbus. With these massive contracts and money figures that they're offering players. Is this something that MLS should be concerned about as you're out? I guess you just have to scour a little bit more thoroughly, or what?
I don't think it's anything to be concerned about. I think it's normal in football. There'll be emerging markets all the time that come and invest in their product. I think having another league that is investing in players is never a bad thing. Is it an impact? I think it will have an impact. Yes, there'll be some players who choose to move to Saudi Arabia instead of coming to MLS. That could be options. But equally, I think it's an opportunity. Obviously, we sold Gabby to Qatar and not Saudi Arabia. But equally, it opens up the possibility for us to play a trade where historically, probably somebody like Gabby we would have only had a market to potentially trade in Europe. Now it opens up another avenue to potentially trade players with and to generate more profits that then can help to go and reinvest in the team. And I think another thing that happened with Gabby is it's a little bit of MLS roster minutia, but Gabby takes up a U22 spot. And so when Gabby were to depart, what it opens up is another U22 spot, which is another way that we can go and invest in a player. When you sell a salary cap player, you only have the amount of money that they occupied in the salary cap to go and replace. And usually if you're selling a player who's in the salary cap, whether it was Jack Harrison or Joe Scally or Tati, you've got a much smaller budget to go and replace them because they're usually outperforming their salary cap. And that's the reason why they're selling them. Whereas Gabby, it's a U22 spot. And so we can go and pay a transfer fee for a player and they occupy the exact same budget charge, the exact same roster spot. And so I think that was another reason why we felt confident, even with a short time frame. Gabby happened in the middle of the window while we were still trying to complete 3, 4, 5 other deals. And we had to essentially start a search from almost scratch. We still felt we could do it because we knew we had the resources available with the U22 spot to go and do it. The other part that I think MLS deserves a huge amount of credit for is the reason the U22 initiative was invented was for the Gabriel Pereira situation. It's to invest in good, high talent, young players that can come in, impact your team, and then you can develop to sell to generate more revenue for us as clubs and participate in the transfer market. Of course, it's disappointing when it happens and it's happening mid-season and you have to manage all of the different aspects of that transfer. But Gabby for me is a perfect example of a player who epitomizes what the U22 initiative was brought in for, and probably would have loved to have had him for longer than 18 months, but that's not what the situation brought us, and so we had to make a move when the offer came to the level it did, and now we wish Gabby the best moving forward in his new club and his new environment.
And as we come to a close here, David, you mentioned Joe Scally, so kudos to the club. Homegrown, developed him, and now still getting paid off as he continues to move, and we'll see what his next step is too. But there's rumors of the league adding a fourth designated player, which I suppose is not shocking, and maybe extending the roster budget. And do you see a path towards MLS without a salary cap or this strict budget, or do you think it's necessary to have a certain structure or rules within the budget to kind of maintain this current competition parity? What's your feeling on that?
Yeah, so I think one of the driving factors behind MLS, and I think one of the most attractive parts is competitive balance. I prefer competitive balance to parity because I think every team is not even. Teams do spend more or less on DPs or U22 players, but competitive balance between the teams, I think, is a positive thing for the league overall. I will say, they don't, or the sporting directors usually are not involved in the discussions around how the league might change the roster structure or the roster regulations, roster rules. Those happen at the committees above us, although, of course, we might be asked our opinion every now and again. I think our job is to construct the roster as competitively as we can be within the rules that we're given. And so, our job is to use the mechanisms they give us to build the best roster we possibly can. I've mentioned previously, one of the downsides to that is when you've been a historically successful team, as we had been over a number of years, that generally means you have a smaller budget. Players that have been with you want more money than you're able to afford. And that usually ends up with maybe the turnover we've experienced in a very, very short period of time is more than others. But usually over a period of a year or two, you end up with quite a lot of turnover when you've been successful for a period. That's just one of the rules. We just have to, my job is to manage within that and build a team that can be competitive within those rules. I think the league is continuing to evolve and develop. So do I see a world where new rules are created, new things happen? Absolutely. I think the league has proven, U22 initiative was the latest, addition to our rule set, but we had TAM before that. There's a whole bunch of things where the league is continually trying to drive and push to produce a better product within the parameters of competitive balance. And I have full trust and faith in the league that they'll continue to find ways that can help us be competitive on the global stage without compromising some of the core fundamentals of our league.
Do you have any notion at all that things may make a move in one direction or another? And as we really wrap, you have to add Messi to this equation and this conversation. And that's where whatever the most recent budget meeting was, I think Ferran Soriano's on one of these committees, isn't he? I'm just curious if you just have a feel for, first of all, Messi and what the rest of the league and sporting directors are thinking about that. Plus, maybe you're all saying, well, this is a good thing. It's going to draw more interest, and maybe this is going to make things a little bit more adequate.
Couple of questions in there, so I'll try and pass them out. So the first one would be, I don't think we know if, when, how the rules will change. I think the league is evaluating, but that's nothing uncommon. The league is constantly evaluating our rules to try to see how we can spend our dollars most effectively to build the best product we possibly can within a framework as agreed by the owners. And so the relevant MLS committees will discuss all of those things. Do I think there is a chance that things move more quickly with the addition of a Messi or some of the other things that have happened in the league, the Apple deal, all those types of things? Potentially, yes, but I think also potentially not. I'm certainly not fortunate enough to be able to be involved in those conversations to get any type of advance notice of things that might change. But I know the league is evaluating, but again, that's nothing unusual. I think for the league to try to see if there are ways to modify our rules to ultimately bring a better product. And Messi, just what an unbelievable story, right? I'm sure you've seen the games. I think they've become absolute must-see TV. It's amazing for MLS, amazing for Apple TV. I think it's an interesting one because it's no surprise that a player who was the best player at the World Cup 8 months ago is going to be very, very good playing against MLS and Liga MX teams, right? Like, that's not a surprise. However, we've all seen big name players, important players come to the league, and they've not had the immediate impact that somebody like Messi has. Now, maybe Messi probably is the greatest of all time, right? And so there's only one of those, and that's probably him. And so maybe again, even with the Beckhams, the Henrys, David Villas, Andrea Pirlo's, Didier Drogba's, Kaká's, all those players, maybe Messi's just probably is on a completely different level to even all of those unbelievable world superstars. But it's just been amazing to watch. And I'm excited we get to play them in later on this season. Hopefully we can come up with something that can stop him or at least slow him down a little bit. But it has been amazing to watch. Amazing for the league. Full credit to Jorge Mas, Jose Mas, David Beckham, Chris Henderson, all of the staff down in Miami to be able to bring Messi to the league. It's an amazing thing for us in MLS, and he has just been absolute lights out in every game, and it's been a joy to watch.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing if Maxime Chanot goes like face to face with him or something. Tries to get him.
We've got a few Argentinians on the team who I'm sure are going to be really excited to see him, to play against him. But ultimately, when the 90 minutes starts, our job's to stop, just to try to find some way to stop him from hurting the teams as he's doing right now. And as what he has shown, it's going to be really, really difficult because he can hurt you in so many different ways. And he's just an unbelievable player. And but I'm looking forward to us playing against him and the rest of the Miami team, which is excellent. Which is excellent. They've also added Busquets, who's been fantastic. Alba, the 3 U22 players they've signed. They've done a great job in the summer, and they're going to be a really competitive team the rest of this season and into next year as well, for sure.
Well, that match is on September the 30th, David, and it's hard not to get excited about it. We're professionals. You work for this club. You're the sporting director, but yeah, I'm sure you had your schedule set for that first night and saw that free kick. Where were you watching at? Just at home?
I was at home, yeah, and my wife and children were out, and I was texting them during the game, going, "Oh my goodness, you're not going to believe what just happened." It was, Hollywood script, probably similar to the Zlatan sort of introduction in the LA Derby a few years ago. Just amazing, amazing. It was a moment. It was absolutely a moment to behold, but also the reality is, his performances even since then have just kicked up a gear, and he's just producing at such a high level, and doing a fantastic job.
Well, David, you were so generous with your time. I really appreciate it. I'm sure the supporters do too, that get a thorough explanation here of how things are working behind the scenes and the challenging job that you have. So thank you so much, and good luck those final 10 games and the push for the playoffs.
Thanks, Glenn. We've got a lot of work to do, but we're excited for these last 10 games. Push for the playoffs begins now. Next week at Minnesota, and we'll be ready to go.
And again, that was David Lee. He was at the training facility. I was at the headquarters in New York City as we talked through some of the things that the sporting director goes through. And primary transfer window, I found it interesting, Roberto. During that window, they definitely wanted a striker. And he talked about the disappointment of Tylus Magno not really working out in that position, as we all saw. And then he was kind of pushed out back to the wing. And then Mounsef Bakrar comes in the secondary window. So there was still a search for a striker at that time. But it was clear that they were hoping Magno would fill the role.
Oh, for sure. And it didn't work out. They tried to catch lightning in a bottle twice. And it just goes to show, really, how special Tati Castellanos is, because of the fact that he came in as a winger and they were able to teach him how to become a center forward. Not that he hadn't done it a little bit in the past, he had, but we remember, and we've spoken to Nick about this, and we, with David and others, how undisciplined he was as a center forward, because he kept on going, chasing the ball, wanting to be involved and not being in the right place at the right time. And they literally had to teach him to say, there's one post, there's the other. You have to stay between those two. We need to find you there. That's where you're supposed to be. And once he absolutely learned how to do that, he developed and he became absolutely lethal. So they were hoping to do that with Tylus Magno, but it didn't quite work out. They're different players. It's not that, I don't want to say that it's poor on Tylus not being able to do that. And maybe at some point he would be able to learn. But for Tati, it was much easier for him to adapt to that than it had been for Tylus. And look, the team really, really thought that it was going to be able to happen. It never really did. And because of it, they didn't have plan B. Gabe Siegel was there, but he's extremely raw. He's got to learn a lot as well. And the fact that now they had to go out of the summer transfer window and address an issue.
Well, the way David put it, Tylus Magno was expected to help in both positions because they were looking for that primary striker. And I think the fact that, and Nick has said this too, and I think it's a legitimate point that he's only 20 years old, and he still has room to grow in terms of maturity. I think sometimes it's almost like, when I coached at Rutgers and you walk past the football players and they look like, grown men, they're built and, they just look like, but they're 18-year-old kids that are making stupid freshman decisions, and you just, I think there's something to that. So I'm hoping Tylus Magno gets, more of an opportunity because, he kind of fell out of the 11 as well along the way. So we'll see how it goes.
For sure. Let's also understand, okay? Tati Castellanos, what is it? He's 25 now, right? So 5 years professionally is a huge amount of time. So I'm not saying that Tylus can't learn that position or can't get better as a winger. For sure he can. For New York City, he absolutely must. Because when you look at this team, you have to understand that Tylus Magno is probably the single most talented player that they have. Sadly, he hasn't lived up to his expectations. And maybe part of it was because they were trying to teach him a new position and all of that, and things just got lost along the way.
But he's
got he's going to be playing, and he's going to be playing on the wing.
Let me just interrupt.
He's got to get better. Yes,
can you hear me? You have to be able to
can
let
I
me
hear
interrupt. This has to be like we're at dinner on the road where I interrupt you, you interrupt me. You got to let it happen, man. So anyway, but one point David made is that he played striker more in a twin striker situation with the U17s in Brazil. So it's not like a completely foreign position to him. So beyond that, Maxi Morales, the thing I learned, and maybe it was common knowledge, I didn't know this, is that Maxi contacted the club. It wasn't the other way around. And you heard David Lee describe it as like, this is not expected. We didn't pursue this. And it didn't seem to take too much time to get Maxi back into the fold, obviously with a different sort of contract. But he really wanted to come back, as he puts it, home. So I thought that was interesting.
It's very interesting, and I think this is a family decision as well, because outside one of the games during the early part of summer, I ran into his wife, and she and I have become friendly, and we chat every so often. When I see her after games, she's so lovely, and I was like, "Hi, what are you doing here?" And she goes, "No, I came to visit," and I was like, "So, are you guys coming back?" She goes, "Oh, I really don't know, but I really love it here." And she's expressed in the past how much she really loves New York City. Now, here's the difference, okay? Maxi himself is more of I want to live in the countryside, with a lot of space. My two dogs have, a whole bunch of space to roam, and she's like a city rat. She's like, I love New York City. I love Manhattan and all that. So, I mean, they've been living out in Connecticut. I don't know if he lost his house or he kept it. I don't know what they did. But
that'll be interesting too. I heard that they
ask him. Yeah.
I heard they may have kept it. They may have kept it, which if they really kept that house, that almost means like, well, maybe we'll be coming back here shortly. Well, not shortly, but who knows? Well, that's interesting with Maxi and the family thing and running into his wife, and it makes sense to have him back. And now, what role he'll play exactly, I think that remains to be seen, and that was made pretty clear by David, because you have Sandy Rodriguez, you have Richie Ledesma, and you have Maxi Morales, who are all really considered 10s, although Santi and Ledesma, we've seen them play on those inside channels, those half spaces. So there is flexibility now for Nick Cushing, that's for sure. The Gabby Pereira story was also interesting. I'm a little disappointed in myself, Roberto, that I didn't follow up a little bit more on that, because just to get a little more detail on the conversations, because it was they were contacted New York City by Al Rayyan in Qatar initially, and then first offer, no good. I don't know how many offers it ended up being. I think it was like a half dozen. And then they final offer, no good. And then 24 hours, they made a second final offer, and the deal got done. And I
think it was more offers than that, the way he explained it. And that's the point, right? Is that they really wanted him. And then, something that we've been told before, that they did this a lot for Gabi, because the amount of money that he was going to get his salary was something like 10 times the amount of salary that he's making. And so you can't say no to that, right? It just becomes really hard. You can't tell a player, look, I know you want to make $6 million a year, but you got to keep our $600,000 a year that we're paying you. It becomes a point where you got to become responsible for the player as well. And I admire that in the club, by the way. I think that that's good. And I know that it hurts the team on the field. And he said they really wanted to keep him for the rest of the season and then be able to sell him in January. But it wasn't going to work out. So they did what was best for Gabi. They did what was best in many ways for the financial interest of the club, because they kept on getting offers and offers and offers. And it became a situation, and well, I'm a New Yorker, you're not. But he got an offer that he couldn't refuse. And at that point, it became clear that they had to do it. But look, they went out and they filled the position. They've got Mosquera now. They've got
Julian Fernandez is the guy.
Is the first
I think
right.
the story of them, actually, it sounded to me like Pereira was chosen ahead of Fernandez at the time of getting the U22 initiative deal for Pereira in, but he was already on the radar, so they went back out and watched him a little bit more, and sure enough, and the explanation of the MLS budget rules and the U22 initiative that they could bring the guy in when it's a little bit more difficult if it's just a regular salary cap guy. So go back and listen to that one too, everybody. If that I'm going to, because the budget rules remain confusing to me at times, Roberto. But the fourth
you
DP,
and everybody, you need to be an expert on that. And I'm serious. The budget rules, you need somebody who has such a level of expertise on that you and I don't have. Okay. And 99% of the people don't have. And I would say there might even be some teams that might have some issues with all of that. And no,
you're saying there's some teams that don't know how to do it.
You need a guru. You seriously need a guru.
Right.
And maybe it's something that should be changed. And it's something that possibly is being explored, as you asked him during your interview, about the possibility of there being a fourth DP being added and the salary cap being elevated. I think it was something like to $27 million. I think that the key there, and I'll interject quickly, is that if and when that happens, the only other major thing that the league could do, and I think that they should do, and they should add to this, is that they've got to take transfer fees out. Okay, transfer fees have to be out of the equation when it comes to measuring salary cap. And that's really, really important, because if you're going to be not only doing business with Qatar and Saudi Arabia, which is going to happen because they're going to come and raid because they've got unlimited funds. Okay, they have unlimited funds, but you also have to be able to go out and compete in the general market. And you're going to have to pay transfer fees for players. And that can't be the difference between being able to bring somebody in and not bringing somebody in who's going to help. There's one thing that MLS has over the Saudi Arabian League, especially, and maybe even Qatar. Okay. And that's the way your family wants to live, right? That's such an important thing. All right. If you're a player who's married, has a kid, has a son, especially has a daughter, right? Saudi Arabia is not the place really for you, okay? Because it just the way that their restrictive society is. And the point being, do you want to really live in New York, or or anywhere else in the States, or do you want to live there? Okay, and especially
by the way, can I interrupt for a moment? A lot of New York City players and staff live in New Jersey. Can I just be clear on that? A lot of people that move and play for the New York City Football Club live in New Jersey. But go ahead.
Because Orangeburg is easier to get from Jersey than it is from New York. And the reason being, you also have that $15 penalty called the George Washington Bridge to get into New York City.
Yeah, so, I know. I pay it quite frequently. Yes, I'm aware of that.
There's that. But also the other thing is that, it's a little bit cheaper to be able to live on the other side of the river than it is on this side of the river. But we have our advantages. Trust me that we do. But quality of living is a big deal. And so, and how, your family is treated and things like that. And especially if you're Hispanic, pretty much anywhere where where they drop you in this country, you're going to find people who speak Spanish, and that makes you feel at home, especially if you don't speak English. Those things are important, and those things allow you to be able to compete for talent year round. And if you're weighing an offer from Qatar and you're weighing an offer from a team from MLS, especially if you have, if you're in Miami, you're in LA, if you're in New York, or you want to be in a quiet area like Columbus or Kansas City or, name it, okay, you can do that. And you can have the quality of life that isn't offered in many places around the world.
Yeah,
that's why it's so attractive to come.
Yeah, but what's more attractive, $6 million or $650,000? Come on.
Well, but for Gabi, he's I didn't think he had a girlfriend or anything like that, and it's Qatar and not Saudi Arabia, and that's a big difference. Okay, it's a really big difference. And so, yes, if you're single and you have the chance to make that sort of money, 100%, you're going to do that.
Okay,
but
so you're
not everybody's in that position.
I know you're talking about families. So the Neymar thing was brought up, and it was discounted. Now I put this up on my Twitter at Glenn Crooks. What's your Twitter? Tell everybody what your Twitter is, Roberto.
At Rob Abramowitz.
At Rob Abramowitz. And so I put up a clip of that and got a lot of response from those also who are on the inside, who feel like they've got information suggesting that, okay, if Neymar doesn't come in this window, he's going to come in the next window, the next summer window. next year. So I didn't go beyond that, but David Lee made it quite clear that you won't see Neymar in 2023 or I'm sure the early part of 2024. But,
Glenn, that as open as New York City is about transfers and talking about transfers and players that are coming in and that they're leaving,
I know
all of that. Yeah, he was really going to open up to us about, Neymar, the way, there's a push within the inside to be able to get him here for 2024. And, we're looking at that.
Well, I thought because I thought I might get more out of the budget thing because Ferran Soriano's on one of these MLS budget committees.
Yes.
So, but David claimed he didn't have any inside information. I don't know about that. But anyway, we talked Messi.
Not that he was going to share with us.
No. Messi, you wonder what everybody feels about Messi if they're in a position like David Lee. And he talked about how excited he was to see his opening goal, texting his wife and kid and, the whole thing. So, what this means for the rest of the teams, that's where I kind of tied in. Maybe the budget will open up a little bit because of Messi.
It has to. It has to. I mean, for a couple of reasons, okay? I still don't know what kind of voodoo and magic, okay, Inter Miami CF is doing right now to be able to fit all these players in. A lot of it, I understand, is because they're in the second half of the season and because you don't have to pay you're only budgeting, the 10 or 11 games that are remaining, and you're not budgeting the entire salary. So players who aren't a DP today, next year will probably have to be a DP because they'll have to fit them in.
You're saying Chris Henderson has some work to do in the offseason. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, my God. Does he have work to do? He's got a lot of work to do because they're going to redo the team. Tata Martino already went and brought in several players from Argentina, young players. And that once the season ends, he's going down to Argentina. And not that he has to scout much or anything because he has his own network and he's got his own people down there. And he knows who's good, who isn't, and who they're going to go after. And trust me, they're going to go after a lot of players, not only in Argentina, Paraguay, Chile. They're going to go in and they're going to get a lot of South American players. They're going to fill in the needed roles that they have. Trust me, they're going to have to buy a few international spots throughout the process. And then there's going to be a lot of guys who are going to be going as well. So that team is going to be transformed as of next year. And if MLS is going to increase the salary cap and increase the DPs and things like that, and I think it's good. And it's time for the other teams in this league, right, for the bottom feeders especially, that they're going to have to step up, right, that they're going to have to start spending some money and bringing some players in. And it's good. It's going to be good for the league. Apple wants this, and that Apple is really going to start pushing, especially some of those teams, to start bringing in players who are attractive, okay, who are going to be good for the league, who are going to be very good for the teams, that are going to make the teams perform better, and that are going to attract eyeballs, okay? Apple has to sell subscriptions, not in America, everywhere. And so if you bring in the best Paraguayan player, well, maybe that's going to sell, maybe a couple of 100,000 subscriptions in Paraguay. If you do the same thing in Chile, if you do the same thing, and that's how you start building it, right? And it's not only going to be South America or Mexico, it's going to be Europe, and it's going to be Africa, and it's going to be Asia. This is the plan. That's why they have a 10-year global deal. And when you start bringing in players that have a high profile, you have a better chance of adding subscriptions. It's a business model. They need to do it for performance on the field because they still have to compete, especially with teams from Mexico. Now we can talk about how well they're doing so far with League Cup, we're going to get into that. But this is a business, and they need to expand the quality of players.
Okay, one note before we go to kicking it around. Julian Fernandez, Alonso Martinez, and Burke Rizzo, these new incoming players for New York City, as of yesterday afternoon, still not in New York City, still not on the training pitch, with the Minnesota game looming on August the 20th at Citi Field. Let's kick it around, Roberto.
But no, wait, stop. Don't kick it around yet. But Maxi Morales and Andres Perea have their visas. They can play as of August 20th. they can play. Okay, now let's kick it around.
Woohoo! Leagues Cup. What's an interesting matchup? We're gonna have a very brief kicking it around, Roberto. So let's just. I'd like to get your take. LAFC Monterrey. Love that match.
Best one.
That's my number one. What do you have?
Yep. No, that's my number one. And anybody who Messi plays.
Well, and I was going to say you're picking that over Messi, Charlotte. That game got moved.
Yeah, I am actually.
That game got moved, or the time got moved. I forget. That game. It's now going to be on August the 11th. No, they're all on Friday night, right?
Yeah, everything's on Friday night. And my good friend Tato Noriega, who's the president of Monterrey, and see how I just threw that in there. He's furious. He's absolutely furious, and he has every right to be. They were supposed to play on the 11th. Eddie Gomez, who does the Frontera TV show, streaming show, podcast with me, he put out a list of the travel that Monterrey has had to do. And I mean, they've had close to, I don't know, they have several 2,000-mile trips. They've crisscrossed the country. They've gone from Houston to Portland to LA, backups to Seattle. I mean, it's been everywhere. I don't know if Seattle was one. Vancouver. No, they didn't go to Vancouver. They did play one game up in the north someplace. But I mean, they've traveled everywhere. And it has been very, very hard for them. It's an unfair advantage that some of the MLS teams have as far as that's concerned, right? Like LAFC, they didn't have to play the first round because they won. And then they've played all their games at home, which have been 2 of them. So Monterrey had to play 2 games before that. And then, you know, in this knockout stage, and they've been crisscrossing the country. So it's been very tough on them. And they were supposed to play Saturday, and then it got moved to Friday. Right. And both LAFC were upset, and Tato was furious about the organization. Not only that, but the Mexican Soccer Federation sort of like weighed in to support America in their loss with Nashville, saying that refereeing has to be better and that the use of VAR has to be better. And it's bull. It's just absolute bull.
Go back.
I understand.
I agree with you. Everyone needs to go back and watch the penalty where the keeper clearly goes off the line, and that's what everybody's referring to. And if you can't really. I mean, he was clearly off the line. He hopped off the line with both feet, which goalkeepers don't do anymore because of the goalkeeping rule. You could dispute the rule or not, but it was really clear, Roberto. And I've gone through this. I mean, all for the past 2 days because I've been on. If you've seen my Twitter, I mean, it literally has been hundreds of tweets that have been going back and forth. David Feitelson from ESPN retweeted one of the photos that I had sent him because he was about to go on the show, and I wanted to make sure that he understood, that there was that the referee got it right. And so I sent him the photos of Malagon stepping off, and you can see clear space between him and the goal line. But there were 3 different things that people were complaining about, especially America fans who, oh my God, do they complain? Jeez, they never lose a game, by the way. Everything's always taken from them and stolen. America's never lost a game in their life legitimately. It is nuts, okay? Well, Nashville, how about the video of Nashville getting showered on their way out of that match? I mean, it was...
it's normal, and it's sad, and it's infuriating. And that's why, by the way, remember that there was music on the on some of the goal kicks with the Atlas game, that there was music in the game at City Field? Do you remember that? And it was like, what is like? Why is they playing music within the game? I realized it was on the goal kicks because they were afraid of the chant. And so they were trying
oh my God! No, I didn't
notice
that at all. I didn't notice that.
Yeah, and it's on every game. Listen to the games, okay? Watch the games and listen when their Mexican team's playing. Every time that there's a goal kick, listen, and there's going to be music playing every time on the goal kick. Anyway, so here are the 3 things that happened and what they were complaining about. 1, that Malagon allegedly didn't step up. He did step up. 2, that there was no reason to review that because the game had ended. wrong. That is absolutely wrong, because on penalty kicks in the VAR era, okay, the game does not end until VAR completes the check on the penalty. Okay, so they check every single penalty. And as a matter of fact, there was at some point a rule, or they had said no celebrating until we hear that VAR has confirmed that the goal is legit and that the game is over. And I don't know if the referee in that game, when he was talking to the teams, reminded them of that or not. But obviously, when Malagon stopped the penalty against Maher, they immediately went into celebration mode. So the other thing was, well, why did it take so long to replay this? They're trying to give Nashville an unfair advantage because they try to look for every angle possible to make sure that America didn't win. This is what they're saying online. And not only fans, Glenn, but it's some of the media as well. And that is what's so freaking disheartening about Mexico, is that you have media who are basically fanboys who have jobs on air, okay, and this is not everybody, but there's enough of them there, that they are openly rooting for teams and they're putting doubt into things that they shouldn't.
When they wear their club kits to the games to cover the game in the press box, I think you get an understanding. And
what they were saying, just let me finish, because what they were saying was that why was there 5 minutes? They're trying to find an advantage. They're looking for ways to screw over our team, and it's for them, it's our team over theirs. And what they didn't see, because they weren't at the stadium, but I mean, I was watching the game on Apple TV like everybody else, and I'm listening to what the announcers were saying, and there was a field invasion. Fans from America went onto the field, and there was a problem with this earlier in the game, and that they were kids coming on taking selfies with players, and the security were doing nothing. And so they needed time to clear the field. But the referee, he was doing his job, and he's listening to VAR, and he probably had 30 seconds, 45 seconds in, somebody from VAR saying, hey, there's a problem here. We're looking at it. And they probably had pretty quickly that he was off the line, because it was pretty clear, and that had to be repeated. But it took 5 minutes to do because they had to clear the field. And so they're saying all these things were against them. And the other last one was that, they looked at that one, but they didn't look at Layun's penalty that Panico stopped because he was off the line. I went on my TV and I checked and I checked and I checked, and I literally was able to stop it at the moment of impact at the ball. And Panico clearly has his left foot not only on the line, but mostly behind the line. And the other rule is, not only do you have to have 1 foot on the line, there's some people saying that you have to have both. It's not true. It's 1 foot on the line or behind the line, and you can do whatever you want with the other foot. But one has to be on the line and the other has behind the line. And it is amazing how many pundits in Mexico, and some here too, that don't know the freaking rule. And they don't know VAR rules either. And it's terrible. They go and they spout it on TV. They spout it on media. And people repeat this. And they show it to me as evidence. And it was nuts. If you go through my Twitter, I know it's all in Spanish, but you can translate. You should see what happened, when it came down to that. It was amazing, and they still don't understand.
Well, that's an issue. I think Monterrey, what they've had to go through and then have to play on Friday, that's an issue too. And I would think Leagues Cup 2024 is not just going to be in the United States of America or North America, because there's been Canadian home games too. So I think that's going to be how you resolve this, is that teams have to have equal travel,
Absolutely. I know that they did it here because they were afraid. Well, first of all, you can charge more for tickets here, and there's a whole bunch of things. But they're also afraid that nobody was going to go show up to Colorado Real Salt Lake game in Querétaro. And by the way, nobody showed up in Austin to Mazatlan against FC Juarez. So, it doesn't matter. And the same thing happened with Querétaro and Tijuana. In Philadelphia, right, in Chester, Pennsylvania, there were less than 1,000 people there. So, look, it's going to happen everywhere. It's going to happen everywhere. So, they have to make it. It has to be one of the things that they do for next year, is that it has to be played in all 3 countries. and you seed everybody by a points per game basis, and you do it that way, and and it's fair for everybody.
Well, they'll take a close look at it. Roberto, wonderful stuff. And for those of you who may have missed a portion or all of the David Lee interview, it's 35 plus minutes, part of NYCFC Views exclusively here on our new podcast. This has been episode 4, Roberto. 4 of many more. Yeah, we already did 4. And I think we'll see you again next Monday. And as New York City approaches their restart in MLS against Minnesota on August the 20th at Citi Field. So for Roberto Abramowitz, I'm Glenn Crooks on NYCFC Views.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast NYCFC Views on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.